I never should have married Catherine. That's what I keep telling myself now, anyway. Hindsight's always 20/20, right? But back then, man, I was head over heels. We tied the knot young, probably too young, but we had it all mapped out. Save up, travel the world, then settle down and start popping out kids. The American dream, served with a side of wanderlust. I can still picture her on our wedding day. Chestnut hair cascading down her back, green eyes sparkling with mischief and promise. She moved with this effortless grace that made heads turn wherever we went. Sharp as a tack, too, or so I thought at the time. "You know what, babe?" I said one night as we sprawled on our ratty apartment couch, dreaming of future adventures. "I think marrying you might be the smartest thing I've ever done." Catherine laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a summer breeze. "Might be? You better be sure, mister. No take-backs now. If only I'd known then how those words would come back to haunt me." Fast forward 5 years, and the shine had started to wear off. Don't get me wrong, Catherine was still gorgeous. But living with someone day in and day out, you start to notice things. The stubbornness that I once found endearing now grated on my nerves. And that razor-sharp wit? Turns out it was more of a dull butter knife. "Hey, did you hear about that new study on climate change?" I asked over breakfast one morning, skimming the news on my phone. Catherine shrugged, focused on spreading jam on her toast with surgical precision. "Why bother? It's all fake news anyway. Scientists are just in it for the grant money." I blinked, caught off guard by the sudden conspiracy theory. "Ah, I don't think that's how it works, Kath." "Well, that's your opinion," she said with finality, effectively shutting down the conversation. And that was Catherine in a nutshell. Once she made up her mind about something, good luck changing it. Facts be damned. Still, we muddled along. Catherine climbed the corporate ladder at Bycatch Industries, eventually landing a cushy gig as a senior product manager. I plugged away at my own career, and we started to build the life we dreamed about. Vacations in Europe, a down payment on a house, all the trappings of success. Then came that day at her office. I decided to surprise her with lunch, maybe rekindle some of that old spark. The receptionist waved me through with a knowing smile, and I strode down the hallway, takeout bag in hand. I rounded the corner to Catherine's office and froze. There, on her desk, sat a massive bouquet of roses. Red ones, a dozen at least. My stomach did a slow roll as I approached, searching for a card. To my secret admirer, it read in flowing script, "Your beauty puts these flowers to shame." The words hit me like a sucker punch to the gut. I must have been standing there for a while, because suddenly Catherine's voice cut through the fog. "Oh, hey, honey. What are you doing here?" I turned, struggling to keep my face neutral. Catherine stood in the doorway, all polished professionalism in her tailored blazer and pencil skirt. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of, "What? Guilt? Panic?" "Thought I'd surprise you with lunch," I said, holding up the bag. "Looks like someone beat me to it with the surprises, though." Catherine's gaze darted to the flowers, then back to me. A smile spread across her face, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, those. Aren't they gorgeous? I thought you sent them, actually." The lie hung in the air between us, as palpable as the cloying scent of roses. I set the takeout bag on her desk, next to that damning bouquet. "Really?" I said, keeping my tone light. "That's funny, because I distinctly remember not sending you flowers today. Or any day this week, for that matter." Catherine's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "Oh, well, I just assumed. I mean, who else would send me flowers at work?" I leaned against her desk, arms crossed. "That's a great question, Kath. Why don't you think about it for a minute? I'm sure it'll come to you." The tension in the room ratcheted up a notch. Catherine's eyes narrowed, all pretense of innocence evaporating. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything," I said, my voice hard. "I'm asking you, point blank, who sent you these flowers?" Because we both know it wasn't me. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. I could almost see the gears turning in Catherine's head as she tried to find a way out of this. Finally, she sighed, shoulders sagging. Look, can we not do this here? Let's go grab that lunch you brought and talk about it, okay? I wanted to push, to demand answers right then and there. But causing a scene in her office wouldn't do either of us any favors. So I nodded, scooping up the takeout bag. Fine, I said. Let's go. As we stepped into the elevator, the tension between us was palpable. Catherine fidgeted with her wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd noticed more and more lately. I kept my eyes fixed on the descending floor numbers, trying to keep my imagination from running wild. The doors opened with a cheerful ding that felt wildly out of place. We made our way to a nearby park in silence, finding an empty bench beneath a sprawling oak tree. I unpacked the sandwiches I'd brought, the smell of fresh bread and roasted turkey a stark contrast to the sour taste in my mouth. All right, I said, handing Catherine her lunch. Let's hear it. She took a small bite, chewing slowly as if to buy herself more time. Finally, she spoke. It's not what you think, you know. I snorted. And what exactly do I think, Catherine? Because right now, I'm thinking my wife is getting flowers from some mystery man and lying to my face about it. It's not like that, she insisted, her voice taking on that defensive edge I knew all too well. They're from a client, okay? Paul St. Clair. He's enthusiastic about the project we're working on. Enthusiastic enough to send roses to a married woman? I asked, skepticism dripping from every word. Catherine's cheeks flushed. It's just business, all right? He's trying to butter me up for a better deal. Nothing more. I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe her. But something in her eyes, in the way she couldn't quite meet my gaze, told me there was more to the story. And you didn't think to mention this little detail to your husband? I pressed. Because I knew you'd react like this. She snapped. You always get so jealous, so possessive. I can handle myself, you know. I don't need you policing my every interaction at work. The accusation stung, mostly because there was a grain of truth to it. I had always been the more protective one in our relationship. But this felt different. I'm not trying to police you, Kath, I said, softening my tone. I'm just asking for honesty. That's not too much to expect from my wife, is it? Catherine's shoulders slumped. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd fallen in love with, vulnerable, open. But just as quickly, the walls went back up. You're right, she said, her voice carefully modulated. I should have told you. It won't happen again. We finished our lunch in uncomfortable silence, the uneaten portions of our sandwiches a testament to our lost appetites. As we walked back to her office, Catherine reached for my hand. We're okay, right? She asked, a note of uncertainty in her voice. I squeezed her hand, pushing down the nagging doubts. Yeah, we're okay. But as I watched her disappear into the building, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us. The trust that had been our foundation for years now felt shaky, unstable. Little did I know, this was just the first crack in a facade that was about to come crumbling down around us. 3 weeks later, I found myself tugging at the collar of a too-tight dress shirt, navigating the sea of tinsel and fake cheer that was the Bycatch Industries Christmas party. Catherine had insisted I come, claiming it would be good for me to put in an appearance with her coworkers. I nursed a watered-down gin and tonic, scanning the crowd for my wife. That's when I saw him, Paul St. Clair. Even from across the room, I could tell he was trouble. Tall, chiseled jawline, the kind of effortless charm that made people gravitate toward him. And right now, he was gravitating straight toward Catherine. I watched as he approached her, noting the way his hand lingered a bit too long on her lower back as he leaned in to speak. Catherine threw her head back in laughter at something he said, and I felt my jaw clench involuntarily. You might want to ease up on that glass there, Tiger, a voice said beside me. I turned to see Natalie, one of Catherine's work friends, eyeing me with a mix of amusement and concern. Sorry, I muttered, loosening my death grip on the tumbler. Just taking in the festive atmosphere. Natalie followed my gaze to where Catherine and Paul were still deep in conversation. Ah, she said, understanding dawning in her eyes. I see you've noticed our resident Casanova. You know him? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. Natalie snorted. Everyone knows Paul. He's got quite the reputation around here. Oh, I prompted, my interest piqued. She leaned in conspiratorially. Let's just say he's not exactly discriminating when it comes to his attention. Married, single, it's all the same to him. He's already gotten HR in hot water a couple of times with harassment complaints. My stomach churned, equal parts anger and fear roiling inside me. And Catherine? Has she? Natalie's eyes widened. Oh, no. I mean, not that I know of. Catherine's always been professional. But Paul, he can be pretty persistent when he sets his sights on someone. I'd heard enough. Mumbling a quick thanks to Natalie, I made my way across the room, weaving through clusters of tipsy coworkers. As I approached, I caught a snippet of their conversation. Really think you'd love it, Paul was saying, his hand now resting on Catherine's arm. The energy in the arena is electric. Catherine smiled, a flush creeping up her neck. It does sound exciting. I've always wanted to see a live game. I cleared my throat loudly, causing them both to start. Hey there, I said, sliding an arm around Catherine's waist. Having fun? Catherine's eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quickly. Oh, honey, there you are. I was just telling Paul how much I wanted you to meet him. Paul's smile never wavered as he extended a hand. Paul St. Clair. Pleasure to finally meet you. Catherine's told me so much about you. I shook his hand, perhaps a bit more firmly than necessary. Funny, she hasn't mentioned you at all. An awkward silence descended, broken only by the tinny sounds of Jingle Bell Rock playing over the speakers. So, Paul, I said, my tone deceptively light. Catherine tells me you're quite the hockey fan. His eyes lit up. Oh, absolutely. There's nothing like watching a game live. The speed, the skill, the raw energy, it's incredible. I nodded, noting how Catherine seemed to hang on his every word. Sounds great. We should all go sometime. You, me, Catherine, and your wife. Double date. Paul's smile faltered for just a moment. Ah, well, Sandra's not really into sports. And Catherine mentioned you weren't much of a fan either. I froze, turning to look at my wife. Did she now? That's funny, because I don't recall ever discussing my sports preferences with you, Kath. Catherine's face had gone pale, her eyes darting between Paul and me. I must have misunderstood. I thought you said once that you didn't like hockey. No, I said. I'm pretty sure I've never said that. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Paul, sensing the shift, took a step back. I should probably go mingle. It was nice meeting you. As he retreated, I turned to Catherine. What the hell is going on here? She had the grace to look ashamed, at least. It's not what you think. Paul's just going through a rough patch with his wife. We've been talking, that's all. Talking? I hissed. About my supposed hatred of sports? About how much you'd love to see a game with him. You're blowing this way out of proportion, Catherine snapped, her embarrassment giving way to anger. I'm allowed to have male friends, you know. Friends don't send each other secret admirer flowers, I shot back. Catherine's eyes flashed. God, you are so controlling sometimes. I can't even have a conversation without you getting jealous and possessive. I'm not being possessive, I said, struggling to keep my voice down. I'm asking you not to act like you're single when you have a husband at home. Or what? She challenged. I met her gaze, steady and serious. Or I walk. It's that simple, Catherine. I won't be made a fool of. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, fear? Regret? But then it was gone, replaced by cold fury. You know what? She said, yanking her arm from my grasp. I need some air. I watched her storm off, leaving me alone in a sea of festive cheer that suddenly felt hollow and false. Later, Catherine made a show of throwing away the flowers from Paul, tossing them in the kitchen trash with a dramatic flourish. There, she said, dusting off her hands. Happy now? I just shrugged, not trusting myself to speak. That night, she was unusually affectionate, practically throwing herself at me in bed. I knew it was guilt driving her actions, but I gave in anyway, desperate for some connection, some proof that we hadn't completely lost our way. But as we lay there afterward, Catherine's head on my chest, I felt more alone than ever. The suspicion gnawed at me, growing with each passing day. I found myself checking Catherine's phone when she was in the shower, scrolling through her emails. There was nothing incriminating, but the guilt I felt at invading her privacy only fueled my paranoia. Finally, I cracked. I reached out to my coworker, Grace, a whiz with all things tech. I need a favor, I told her over coffee one morning. It's personal. Grace raised an eyebrow. Personal as in, I need help planning a surprise party, or personal as in, I'm about to do something illegal? I winced. Somewhere in between, maybe? She sighed, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. All right, spill it. I explained the situation, watching as Grace's expression shifted from interest to concern to something like pity. GPS trackers, she said finally. Small enough to hide in a car, powerful enough to give you real-time locations. I can set them up to feed directly to your phone. My stomach churned at the idea, but I nodded. How soon can you get them? 2 days later, I found myself crouched beside Catherine's car in the pre-dawn darkness, my breath coming in cloudy puffs as I attached the tiny device beneath her rear bumper. I did the same to Paul's car that evening, timing it perfectly with his weekly squash game at the gym. For a week, nothing happened. The dots on my phone showed Catherine and Paul's cars exactly where they should be, at work, at home, running mundane errands. I started to feel ridiculous, ashamed of my paranoia. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, both dots suddenly converged at a location I didn't recognize. My heart pounding, I zoomed in on the map. The Smokin' Pig barbecue joint. I stared at the screen, willing the dots to separate, to prove me wrong. But they remained stubbornly together for over an hour before finally parting ways. That evening, Catherine breezed through the door, her cheeks flushed from the cool autumn air. Hey, babe, she called, hanging up her coat. Sorry, I'm late. Got caught up in a meeting. I looked up from my laptop. No problem. How was your day? She shrugged, rummaging through the fridge. Same old, same old. Endless meetings, mountains of paperwork. You know how it is. I nodded, my eyes fixed on a dark stain on the collar of her white blouse. You eat at the cafeteria today? Catherine froze for just a moment before answering. Yeah, why? No reason, I said. Just curious. She turned, a yogurt in hand, and caught me staring. What? Do I have something on my face? I stood up slowly, moving towards her. Not your face, I said, reaching out to touch the stain on her collar. Looks like barbecue sauce. The color drained from Catherine's face. She looked down, as if noticing the stain for the first time. Oh, that's... I must have splashed something at lunch. Clumsy me. Funny, I said. I didn't know the cafeteria served barbecue. Catherine's eyes darted around the room, looking everywhere but at me. They were trying out a new menu item. Look, what's with the third degree? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I know you had lunch with Paul today, Catherine. At the Smokin' Pig. Her face went from pale to flushed in an instant. You're spying on me now? She hissed, anger overtaking shock. What, did you put a tracker on my car or something? The fact that she jumped straight to the truth only confirmed my worst fears. So you're not even going to deny it? We're colleagues, for God's sake. Catherine exploded. We're allowed to have lunch together. You're acting like a crazy person. Am I? I shot back. Because from where I'm standing, my wife is sneaking around with another man and lying to my face about it. Tell me, Catherine, what part of that should I be okay with? She deflated slightly, running a hand through her hair. It's not like that. We're just friends. Friends don't lie to their spouses about spending time together, I said. Friends don't send secret admirer flowers. And friends sure as hell don't make their friend feel like she needs to hide their relationship. Catherine's eyes flashed. I'm hiding it because I knew you'd react like this. You're so damn insecure, so controlling. I can't even have a male friend without you losing your mind. This isn't about control, I said. This is about trust. And right now, I don't trust you, Catherine. You've given me no reason to. She stared at me for a long moment, her chest heaving with emotion. When she spoke again, her voice was ice cold. "If that's how you feel, maybe we need to rethink this whole marriage thing." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to back down. "Maybe we do. Because I'm not going to stick around and watch my wife fall for another man." "You're being ridiculous," Catherine spat. "Nothing is happening between Paul and me." "Then prove it," I challenged. "Cut off contact with him. Find a new lunch buddy." Catherine's laugh was bitter and hollow. "Right, because that's a totally normal thing to ask of your wife. Get over your jealousy issues, or this marriage isn't going to last much longer." With that, she stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with the lingering scent of barbecue sauce and betrayal. As I stood there, staring at the space where Catherine had been, I realized we'd reached a turning point. Whatever happened next would define the future of our marriage, if we even had a future left. Catherine accused me of being controlling and paranoid, while I countered that her secretive behavior was destroying our trust. We were caught in a vicious cycle, each of us retreating further into our corners with every exchange. Despite her protests, I noticed Catherine was more guarded with her phone, often taking calls in another room or angling her screen away from me when texting. The GPS trackers showed more coincidental meetups between her and Paul, coffee shops, parks, once even at a boutique hotel bar. Each time, she had a ready excuse: work meetings, running into him by chance, networking events. But the frequency was too much to ignore. I was a wreck, alternating between burning anger and crushing despair. How had we gotten here? The woman I'd built my life around, the one I'd trusted implicitly, now felt like a stranger. One sleepless night, as I lay staring at the ceiling while Catherine's steady breathing filled the room, I made a decision. If she was going to betray our vows, I needed irrefutable proof, not just for a potential divorce, but for my own sanity. The next day, I made a trip to an electronics store where I purchased a small clock radio with a hidden camera inside. It felt surreal, like I was playing a part in some trashy spy movie rather than dismantling my own marriage. With Grace's help, I tracked Paul and Catherine's movements, waiting for an opportunity. It came sooner than I expected. On a Friday afternoon, both GPS dots converged at the Holiday Inn just off the highway. My hands shook as I drove to the hotel, the clock radio sitting accusingly in the passenger seat. At the front desk, I spun a story about surprising my wife for our anniversary, slipping the clerk a $100 bill to tell me which room was reserved under Paul's name. Room 237. The numbers seemed to mock me as I stood outside, gathering my courage. Using the keycard the clerk had provided, I slipped inside. The room was empty, but signs of recent occupation were everywhere. Catherine's favorite perfume lingering in the air, an open bottle of wine on the nightstand. Fighting down a wave of nausea, I quickly set up the hidden camera, angling it towards the bed. I had just finished when I heard voices in the hallway. Panic surged through me as I recognized Catherine's laugh. I ducked into the bathroom, my heart thundering in my chest as the door opened. "Can't believe you talked me into this," Catherine was saying, her voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness that made my stomach churn. Paul's deep chuckle followed. "Live a little, Kath. Your husband will never know." I closed my eyes, willing myself to stay silent as I heard the rustle of clothing, the creak of bedsprings. Part of me wanted to burst out, to catch them in the act. But a colder, more calculating part knew that the camera would provide better evidence in the long run. I waited, each second an eternity, until I heard the shower turn on. Then, moving as quietly as I could, I slipped out of the bathroom and out of the room. The drive home was a blur. I felt hollow, numb, like I was watching someone else navigate through traffic. At home, I mechanically went through the motions of everyday life, making dinner, answering emails, anything to keep my mind off what was happening in that hotel room. When Catherine came home that evening, her hair slightly damp and a guilty flush on her cheeks, I couldn't bring myself to confront her. Not yet. Not until I had seen the footage for myself. "Late meeting," she mumbled, avoiding my eyes as she headed for the shower. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That night, after Catherine had fallen asleep, I retrieved the camera. I connected it to my laptop and started the playback. The images that filled my screen confirmed my worst fears. Catherine and Paul, tangled together on the hotel bed, their betrayal playing out in high definition. I watched, feeling sick, as they laughed about the agreement Catherine had signed, Paul assuring her it would never hold up in court. I closed the laptop, my mind made up. There would be no tearful confrontations, no chance for excuses or reconciliation. Catherine had made her choice. Now it was time to make mine. The next morning, I casually suggested we update our wills, presenting Catherine with a crude legal document I had drawn up. It stated that if either of us cheated and it could be proven to a judge, the cheater would leave the marriage with only $5,000 while the other got everything else. Catherine laughed, clearly thinking it was a joke. "Where did you get this? Some divorce lawyer's blog. It looks ridiculous. Just something I found online. Thought it might give us both some peace of mind. You know, with all the temptation out there." She rolled her eyes but signed it, probably thinking it would never hold up. I had my friend Terry witness it, making it legally binding. Now, all I had to do was wait. I knew Catherine wouldn't be able to resist seeing Paul again. And when she did, I'd be ready. The next few weeks I played the role of the oblivious husband, while secretly tracking Catherine's every move. She grew bolder, less careful about hiding her rendezvous with Paul. I bribed the hotel clerk to always give Paul the same room 237, the one with my hidden camera. It wasn't long before I started getting calls from Catherine's coworkers, Natalie and Julie. They'd taken pity on me, discreetly letting me know when Paul was back in town to meet Catherine. Each time, I'd retrieve the camera footage, building an ironclad case against my unfaithful wife. It was soul-crushing work, watching the woman I'd loved betray me over and over again. But I steeled myself, focusing on the endgame. Finally, after about a month of this charade, I decided it was time to end things. I got the usual call from Natalie, tipping me off about Paul's arrival. This time, instead of planting the camera, I waited in the hotel parking lot. Hours crawled by as I sat there, my mind racing through all the ways this confrontation could play out. When I finally saw Catherine emerge from the hotel, a satisfied smile on her face, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I stepped out of my car just as she was calling back to Paul, "Same time next week, honey?" "I don't think so," I said. Catherine whirled around, her face draining of color as she saw me. "Oh my God," she whispered, eyes wide with shock and fear. "Oh my God is right," I replied, a bitter laugh escaping me. "I'm doing the same thing you're doing, Catherine. Witnessing the end of our marriage." She stammered, trying to form some kind of excuse, but I cut her off. "Don't bother going home. You don't have one anymore. I've changed the locks. I'll drop your things off at your mom's place." Catherine's shock gave way to anger. "You can't do that. It's my house too." I pulled out a copy of the agreement she'd signed, watching as recognition dawned in her eyes. "Actually, I can. You violated our agreement, remember? I get the house, the investments, everything." Her face contorted with rage. "That ridiculous thing? It'll never hold up in court. Want to bet?" I asked, my voice cold. "Because I've got hours of video evidence that says otherwise." She lunged at me, clawing for the paper, but I held it out of reach. "You bastard!" she screamed, drawing curious looks from passers-by. "You set me up." "No, Catherine. You did this all on your own. I just made sure there would be consequences." As I turned to leave, I called out to the still open hotel room door, where I knew Paul was listening. "Hey, Raleigh. I hope Catherine's particular style of marriage counseling worked out for you and Grace. Don't forget to take them to the Flyers game. She'll love it. Everyone goes there for the fights." I heard a muffled curse and the sound of scrambling from inside the room. Seems like Paul had his own secrets to hide. Ignoring Catherine's continued shouts and threats, I got in my car and drove away. It was over. In the weeks that followed, Catherine tried everything to fight the agreement. But between the ironclad contract and the video evidence, her lawyer advised her to cut her losses. She left with her $5,000, her reputation in tatters. Paul and his wife split up too, once Grace found out about his infidelity. Last I heard, He and Catherine had shacked up together, but it didn't last. Turns out, relationships built on lies rarely do. As for me, I won't lie and say I came out of this unscathed. The betrayal left deep scars, and it took a long time before I could trust anyone again. But as I sit here now, in the house that Catherine and I once shared, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time: peace. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not even sad. I'm just free. Free from the lies, the suspicion, the constant doubt. It cost me my marriage, but in the end, I got something far more valuable: the truth. Some might say I went too far, that I should have just confronted Catherine at the first sign of trouble. Maybe they're right. But in those moments of desperation, when your whole world is crumbling around you, you do what you have to do to survive. I survived. If you're over 18, don't miss the upcoming story and remember to click the like button to show your support. Thank you.